Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we've got something really interesting lined up. A series of sources labeled Dynaxiom 3321-333 stuff.
Yeah, these are fascinating. They're like these compact, almost aphoristic observations.
Exactly. Not long essays, but really sharp takes on everything from how we form beliefs to democracy's surprising fragility, even what music is.
They cover a lot of ground.
So our mission today is to really unpack these specific entries. They seem like they're from some kind of ongoing philosophical journal, judging by the high numbers, 3,300.
Right. Sequential thoughts?
We want to pull out the core ideas, the rules for living actively, thinking critically, especially as they relate to modern life.
And what's striking is how relevant they feel, especially the ones with those 2025 dates we see later on. They really push you to look at the process behind things.
Process, not just the end result.
Exactly. Whether it's a political opinion you hold or maybe even something generated by AI, it's how you got there that matters. We'll be calling out the specific entry numbers and dates where we have them.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The architecture of thought. Maybe. Starting with entry 3321. This one's about how we reach conclusions.
Yeah, this entry puts forward a pretty bold, maybe even slightly humbling idea. It says your life is basically defined by how you conclude things.
Defined by the process.
Right. We all think our reasoning is sound, naturally, but to really get why someone else holds a completely different view, think about, say, two smart people disagreeing fundamentally on economics or a politician.
Okay.
You'd have to recursively unpack every single little step they took, all the inputs, the readings, the experiences.
Wow, okay. Recursively. That sounds like an enormous task. Almost impossible.
It's incredibly complex. The source suggests most people just can't, or maybe won't, do that deep dive into someone else's reasoning path.
So if understanding is that hard, are we just stuck in our own bubbles? Intellectually isolated?
Well, the entry points out something crucial. Even if you could trace all those steps, understand the entire logic. That doesn't mean you have to accept the final conclusion.
Ah, okay. So understanding the why doesn't equal agreement.
Exactly. Understanding the path isn't the same as endorsing the destination. It acknowledges the complexity without demanding agreement.
All right, that distinction is important. But it still begs the question, if full understanding is so rare, how do these sources suggest we can get closer to, well, truth?
That leads us to entry 3325. It makes a really direct point. The more you actively engage with something, the more likely you are to find the truth it holds.
Engage how? What kind of engagement?
It contrasts, say, the deep investment needed for, like, a personal art project or writing a book that needs heavy research versus beliefs you just sort of accept without that deep personal dig.
So passively receiving information isn't enough. It needs active work.
Precisely. The entry gives an example. Think about someone who really got into climate change back in the mid to late 90s, maybe started doing environmentally focused music projects.
Like Sting with the Rainforest Foundation way back when.
Exactly like that, yeah. Late 80s even. That kind of long-term, personal, maybe even creative exploration. That's deep investment. It's very different from just, adopting a stance because it's common.
That depth increases the chance of finding something durable, something true for you. Makes sense.
It's about the work involved.
Okay, this idea of personal investment, of deep engagement. Let's see how it plays out in creativity. Moving on to entry 3322.
Right, entry 3322 looks at the foundation for creative work. It says, pretty simply, in visual art, you need to look and observe before you make.
Okay.
And in music, you need to listen and study before you make. Seems obvious, maybe.
But maybe less common now, with tools making it so easy to just start creating.
That's the tension, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
easier than ever to jump in, especially, with AI generating things. But this entry asks us a key question. Who are you imitating if you haven't actually studied the artists?
Ah. So imitation isn't bad.
No, not at all. The source says imitation is crucial, particularly when you're starting out. You need models. You need a foundation to build on or even react against.
Got it. Okay, sticking with music, entry 3328 takes a different tack. It's not about making music, but defining it. How does it do that?
This one's quite philosophical. It suggests music is essentially a frame put around silence, or maybe around disorganized sounds.
A frame. How does that work?
It tries to find the line between just random noise and something musical. It gives this abstract example, a sequence of numbers, like 9, 5, 6, 3, 40, just numbers.
Okay.
But if that sequence suddenly starts repeating, looping, that repetition itself creates a rhythm. It becomes kind of seed, a musical frame.
So repetition is the key ingredient, turning noise into a musical idea.
According to this entry, yes. It's the emergence of a repeating pattern. Then you could assign sounds to that pattern, pitched sounds, or even unpitched noises like a door slam, your phone pinging, a car horn, a toaster popping.
You could assign those sounds to the 9-5-6-3-40 sequence.
Exactly. Once those sounds are tied to that repeating sequence, that frame, it becomes musical. The repetition creates expectation, and the assigned sounds fulfill it within that structure.
Interesting definition. Focusing purely on structure and repetition as the core. Okay, let's pivot now to technology's impact, which feels very current. Entry 3324, and this one has a date, August 2025. It's about AI.
Yes, this one states it very directly. AI is now a choice we have to make. It's not optional anymore, in terms of awareness, at least.
Choice we have to make, meaning use it or don't use it.
Well, the writer expresses a personal preference. They want to be in the loop as much as possible, involved in shaping AI output, questioning it. But the bigger point they make is the risk.
The risk.
The risk of being completely out of the loop if you choose to ignore it entirely. If you just say, nope, not using it, not interested.
But hang on, if, as other entries suggest, AI output can be a bit shallow. Couldn't staying out of the loop be a valid choice? A choice for quality, for that deep engagement entry 3329 talked about.
That's a fair challenge. But this entry argues that total disengagement is the bigger risk. It uses an analogy. Imagine choosing never to have a telephone back in, say, 1990.
Okay. You'd be cut off.
Completely unaware of how the world was changing, how people communicated, how business was done. Isolation. The entry suggests it's better to understand the new tech even if you choose not to rely on it heavily.
Know thy enemy, or at least thy neighbor's new tool.
Something like that. It gives another analogy. Using a zoom lens versus a prime lens. With a zoom, you twist the lens to change focus. With a prime, you physically move your feet.
Different ways to get the shot.
Right. The point is, even if you prefer the prime lens approach doing the work yourself, moving your own feet, you still need to understand how the zoom lens works and what it can do. Understand the technology.
Okay, that makes sense. Understand it even if you use it selectively or critically, which leads us to quality. If we are engaging with AI, what about the output? Entries 3325 and 3327 seem critical.
They really are. Entry 3325 uses this great metaphor. It says, AI music might look finished, sound polished, but it's like having a fake engine under the hood.
A fake engine.
Yeah.
Like a movie trop car.
Exactly. It looks the part, but it's a replica. If you wanted it to actually do something in the real world, drive somewhere, you'd need to make real modifications. The AI output by itself often lacks that functional substance.
And what modifications are missing? What's not functional?
Entry 3327 builds on that. It says AI music works out of the box, instantly usable, but it makes it impossible to think out of the box.
Also.
Because the user often lacks the fundamental controls a musician or songwriter needs. Things like easily changing the key, the meter, adding modulation between sections, controlling dynamics naturally.
It's all pre-baked.
Yeah, it's like a microwave meal, the entry implies. Designed for quick consumption, not for, taking the ingredients and making something truly new yourself. You can't easily reshape the core material. That's the missing engine part.
That constant need for engagement, for digging deeper, whether it's with truth, creativity, or even technology. It seems to connect to civic life, too. Let's look at entry 3326. This one's dated September 2025, and it talks about democracy.
Yes, this one hits hard. It makes a really sharp point. What makes democracy vulnerable isn't always some external enemy. It's the idea that democracy should be comfortable.
Comfortable, meaning easy, requires no effort.
Sort of.
Yeah.
The writer reflects on the past, maybe pre-internet times, when you could take breaks. Turn off the news, read a book, focus on music. There was a baseline assumption of stability, of comfort.
And that comfort led to complacency, made the system fragile.
That's the implication. The entry states the writer now realizes democracy is actually quite vulnerable and seems to demand constant vigilance, checking emails for action alerts, signing petitions, calling representatives, writing letters, listening to talks.
It sounds exhausting.
It can feel like it consumes your life, the entry suggests. That sense of normalcy, the comfort we might crave. That's just an old memory of how things used to feel. You can't just tune out anymore because the price of that perceived comfort is real vulnerability.
Wow, okay. That's a sobering thought for September 2025.
Ah.
Let's try and pull these threads together. Entry 3323 seems to zoom out. connecting this need for engagement to our life commitments in general.
Yeah, this is a good one to reflect on. It uses the idea of life as a series of subscriptions, not just magazines, but beliefs we hold, habits we have, maybe even relationships.
Subscriptions we keep paying for, metaphorically.
Exactly. And often we continue them even if they go unused. Entry 3323 gives this really vivid, almost comical example. Imagine still being subscribed to Columbia's record club 50 years later.
Oh, wow. You'd have thousands of records you never even opened, let alone listened to.
Right, piles of them. It hits hard, that image.
Yeah, it really does. We all have those kinds of subscriptions, don't we? Maybe a belief we picked up years ago or a skill we started learning, and we've just let it sit there, forgotten why we signed up.
And the entry prompts us to ask, is there still value there? We might question why we ever committed, but maybe the worth is still latent, just waiting for us to re-engage, to pay attention again.
It requires that active engagement, just like finding truth in entry 3329 or maintaining democracy in 3326. It's all connected.
Absolutely. If you pull back and look at the bigger picture from these Dynaxioms, the message seems clear. Knowledge, value, meaning. These aren't things you just stumble upon passively.
They require work.
Active engagement, study, questioning assumptions, whether you're looking at AI music, someone else's political reasoning, or even the comfort level of your own democracy.
In that act of questioning, maybe even poking fun at established ideas.
Yeah.
The sources suggest that's not new.
Not at all. Which brings us to a final kind of provocative thought, circling back slightly to entry 3300 on comedy.
Okay, entry 3300. Comedy was always postmodern. What does that mean?
Well, if you think of postmodernism involving things like playfulness, irony, maybe mixing high and low culture, like taking sacred texts and adding witty, maybe critical commentary.
Right.
Entry 3300 argues that impulse is ancient. It didn't start in the 20th century. It gives the example of medieval scribes.
The monks copying manuscript.
Exactly. Apparently, they used proofreading marks and little drawings in the marginalia, not just for corrections. Sometimes these were jokes, satire aimed at the religious authorities, or even like pop culture references that only a 15th century reader would get.
Seriously. Little rebellious doodles and jokes in the margins of sacred texts.
Seems so. Playfulness and critique, right there on the page.
So this tradition of questioning big truths, established norms, accepted ideas of beauty, often using humor or cleverness, it's centuries old.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the margins of our culture today? Where are we writing our own kind of marginalia?
On social media feeds, in memes, in the code comments of AI.
Maybe all of the above. What contemporary satire, what ironic commentary will people look back on centuries from now and see as our way of questioning the establishment?
Definitely something for all of you listening to think about as you navigate your own conclusions, your own subscriptions, your own engagement with the world.
Good place to leave it.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into Dynaxiom's 3300 through 3330. We hope these ideas give you some new frames for thinking. Thanks for joining us.